Sidewalk vendor compliance fee. $500. I need you to pay that fee today.
Officer, I've never heard of that fee in my life, and I've had this permit for 40 years.
Things change. If you want to stay open, you pay for it.
Odessa felt her jaw tighten. She had heard men try to scare her before. She was not new to this.
Then I guess I'm not paying because there's no fee like that. Not in this city.
No.
Not anywhere.
You sure you want to do that, old woman? I can make your life real hard if I want to.
Officer, I built this place with my own hands. Nobody's shaking me down in it.
That was when the door slowly swung open, drawing every eye in the diner toward who had just walked in.
What exactly is going on here?
Odessa's son had been away serving his country. Now he was home, facing the man who's threatening his mother. The smell of bacon and coffee filled Middleton's corner diner. Odessa Middleton moved fast behind the counter, filling cups, calling out orders, smiling at the regulars who had eaten here for years. She was 71 years old. She had run this diner for 4 decades. Her hands still moved like she was 40. The door chimed. She glanced up out of habit, ready to greet whoever walked in. It was Officer Gary Harson. He didn't sit down. He didn't order coffee. He walked straight past the waiting customers, straight to the register, like he owned the place. "Morning, Odessa," he said. His voice was loud. Too loud for a diner this small. "Got your fee today?" Odessa set down the coffee pot, slow and careful. "What fee?" "Sidewalk vendor compliance fee." He said it like it was nothing, like he'd said it 100 times before. $500. Cash. Today. The diner got quiet. A few regulars looked up from their plates. "I've never heard of that fee in my life," Odessa said, "and I've had this permit for 40 years. Harson smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Things change. You want to stay open? You pay it. Show me the paperwork." "I don't need paperwork. I'm the paperwork." Odessa felt her jaw tighten. She had heard threats before. She had heard men try to scare her before. She was not new to this. "Then I guess I'm not paying," she said. "Because there's no fee like that. Not in this city. Not anywhere." Harson's smile faded. His eyes went cold. "You sure you want to do that, old woman?" The words hit the room like a slap. A man at the counter set his fork down hard. A woman near the window pulled her purse closer, like trouble was coming, and she wanted to be ready to leave. Odessa didn't flinch. "I built this place with my own hands. Nobody's shaking me down in it." That a fact. Harson stepped closer to the register, close enough that Odessa could smell his coffee breath. "Here's another fact. I can make your life real hard, real fast. Health code, fire code, zoning. I can find something wrong with this dump in 5 minutes if I want to. There's nothing wrong with this diner. There's always something wrong." He leaned in. "Especially when I'm looking for it." Odessa's hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from anger. 40 years. 40 years of early mornings, late nights, raising her son alone above this diner, paying every bill on time, passing every inspection. And this man, young enough to be her grandson, thought he could walk in and take it from her with a made-up number and a badge. "I'm not opening that register," she said, and her voice didn't shake at all. "Not for you. Not for a fee that doesn't exist." Harson's face twisted. Something ugly came into his eyes. "Fine," he said. "The easy way's off the table." He turned from the register and walked toward the kitchen pass, where the food came through. He looked around like he was hunting for something. His eyes landed on the napkin dispensers stacked clean and neat by the prep station. "Let's see what else we got going on back here," he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Odessa's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. She had seen this kind of man before. The kind who couldn't stand being told no, so he found another way to punish you for saying it. Harson reached out and knocked over a stack of napkin dispensers. They clattered onto the counter, scattering everywhere. "Health violation," he said, like he'd found gold. "Unsanitary conditions." "That is a clean napkin dispenser," Odessa said, her voice rising now. "You knocked it over yourself." He ignored her. He pulled a small notepad from his belt, the kind cops use to write tickets. He flipped it open slow, like he had all day, like he wanted her to watch him do it. "You had your chance to handle this the easy way," he said, not even looking at her. "Now, we're going to do it my way." He clicked his pen. The sound was small, but in that quiet diner, it felt like a gunshot. "Let's see what else is wrong back here," he said, and started toward the kitchen. Harson pushed past the counter and into the kitchen like he'd been invited. Odessa followed close behind him, her heart pounding, her mind racing through every clean surface, every stocked shelf, every rule she had followed for 40 straight years. "Careful," she said. "That's a working kitchen. You don't just walk back there." "I'm a police officer," he said, not even turning around. "I go where I want." He grabbed a prep tray off the counter and tipped it, letting sliced vegetables spill onto the floor. "Look at that," he said, shaking his head like he was disgusted. "Food just sitting out. That's a health code violation right there." "You just knocked that over yourself," a voice called out. It was Maverick, a regular who'd been eating breakfast at that counter every day for 6 years. He stood up from his stool. "I watched you do it. We all did." Harson turned on him fast. "You want to be part of this? Sit down and mind your business, or I'll find something wrong with you too." Maverick's jaw clenched, but he sat. Everyone in the diner understood the same thing at the same moment. This wasn't about napkins or vegetables. This was about power, and Harson wanted them all to watch him use it. He pulled out his citation pad again and started writing, fast, not even looking at what he was writing down. "You've always been a problem," he said to Odessa, loud enough for the whole room. "This place has been a problem for years. I don't know how you've gotten away with it this long." "I have passed every single inspection this city has ever sent me," Odessa said. Her voice was shaking now, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back 40 years of rage. "Every single one. You know that. You knew that before you walked in here." "I know what I see," Harson said, "and what I see is a mess." He tore the citation off the pad and slapped it down on the counter. "Formal write-up. This goes to the city. Could mean a full closure review. Might shut you down for good this time." The words landed like a fist. A woman near the window gasped. Someone's fork clattered onto a plate. Odessa felt the floor tilt under her, just for a second. 40 years, gone, because a man with a badge decided to be cruel on a Tuesday morning. But she did not cry. She would not give him that. "You are lying," she said, low and steady. "And everyone in this diner knows you're lying." Harson stepped in close enough that she could feel his breath. "Doesn't matter what they know. Matters what I write down. And I write down whatever I want." He smiled again, that same ugly smile from before, like he was enjoying every second of this. "Tell you what," he said. "I'll come back before closing. Give you all day to think it over. $500 makes this citation disappear, makes the whole problem disappear. Your choice. I already told you my answer. Then I guess we'll see how bad you want to keep this place." He tapped the citation once, hard, on the counter. "Ticking clock, Odessa." The way he said her name, casual, mocking, like they were old friends instead of strangers, made her skin crawl. She had never told him her first name. He'd looked her up. He'd done his homework before he ever walked through that door. This wasn't the first time he'd done this. It wouldn't be the last either, unless somebody stopped him. The diner sat frozen, every eye on the standoff at the counter. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loud. Harson straightened his jacket, satisfied with himself, and turned toward the door like he'd already won. That was when the chime rang. The door swung open, and every head in the diner turned toward it. A man stepped inside, tall, still in uniform, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder like he'd come straight from an airport. He stopped just inside the doorway. His eyes moved across the room fast. The overturned prep tray, the scattered vegetables, the citation pad in Harson's hand, and his mother standing behind the counter with her chin up and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Something in his face went very still. For a second, nobody in the diner said a word. Timothy Middleton stood just inside the door, duffel bag still on his shoulder, and read the room the way he'd been trained to read every room for the last 10 years. His mother, standing rigid behind the counter. A cop with a citation pad in his hand. Vegetables scattered across the kitchen floor. Fear on the faces of people he'd known his whole life. He set the duffel bag down slow, without taking his eyes off Harson. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm. Too calm, almost. The kind of calm that made people nervous. "Timothy." Odessa's voice cracked on his name, just slightly. Relief and worry mixed together. "This officer says I owe him $500, says it's a fee." Harson looked Timothy up and down, taking in the uniform, unimpressed. "This doesn't concern you." "Step outside." "She's my mother," Timothy said. "It concerns me." "Then I'll say it again. Step outside before I make you." Timothy didn't move. He walked toward the counter instead, slow and deliberate, closing the distance between himself and Harson until they were standing almost face to face. He was taller, broader, but he kept his hands loose at his sides, his voice level. "My name is Timothy Middleton," he said. "I'm a Navy SEAL. I just got off a flight this morning after 10 months overseas, and I walked into my mother's diner to find you shaking her down for money she doesn't owe you." Harson laughed, short and sharp. "SEAL, huh? That's supposed to scare me?" "No," Timothy said. "It's just a fact. Like the fact that you knocked over a napkin dispenser and called it a health violation. Like the fact that there's no such thing as a sidewalk vendor compliance fee in this city. I know, because I checked the city code on my phone while I was walking through that door." Harson's smile faltered, just barely. "I've spent 10 years around guys exactly like you," Timothy went on, his voice never rising. "Men who think a badge or a uniform means nobody's allowed to question them. Men who pick on people they think can't fight back. An old woman running a diner alone. That's an easy target for you, isn't it?" "Watch your mouth," Harson snapped, but there was less weight behind it now. Near the counter, an off-duty officer named Rupert, a regular who ate breakfast there most mornings, stood up slowly, phone in hand. "Wait. Middleton. Timothy Middleton?" He looked at Harson. "You don't know who this is? He's on the news, man. Got a commendation last year. Everybody at the precincts heard his name." Harson's eyes flicked to Rupert, then back to Timothy, and something shifted in his face. The confidence that had filled the room minutes earlier was draining out of him fast, replaced by something closer to panic. "That doesn't change anything," Harson said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Rules are rules." "Then show me the rule," Timothy said. "Show me where it's written down that my mother owes you $500 for nothing. Show me right now, in front of everyone in this diner." Silence. Harson didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. Every eye in the diner was on him now, not with fear anymore, but with something worse for a man like him. Judgment. "This isn't over," Harson muttered, stuffing his citation pad into his jacket. He grabbed the torn-off ticket from the counter and crumpled it in his fist. like that would erase what everyone had just watched him do. "You're right about that," Timothy said quietly. "It isn't." Harson shoved past him toward the door, his shoulder knocking hard against Timothy's on the way out. Timothy didn't move, didn't react. He just watched him go, jaw tight, eyes tracking every step until the door swung shut behind him. The diner stayed frozen for a long moment. Then, slowly, sound came back. A shaky exhale from Maverick, a murmur passing table to table, someone's fork finally scraping a plate again. Odessa came around the counter and wrapped her arms around her son, holding on tighter than she meant to. "I'm so glad you're home," she whispered. Timothy held her, but his eyes stayed on the door, on the empty street outside where Harson's cruiser sat, parked at the curb. "Me too, Mama," he said. "But that man's not done. Men like that never are." That evening, Gary Harson walked into the precinct, with his jaw still tight from the morning. He didn't stop at his desk. He went straight to Captain Dale Parker's office and shut the door behind him. Parker looked up from his paperwork. He was a heavy man with gray at his temples and eyes that missed nothing. "You look like you had a bad day." "The Middleton Diner's a problem," Harson said. "That old woman on 5th Street. She's been running that place without proper oversight for years. Somebody needs to shut it down." Parker leaned back in his chair. He knew Harson well enough to know when he was leaving parts out. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. I did a routine check." She got defensive. "Gary," Parker's voice had an edge now. "What happened?" Harson hesitated, then gave a version of the truth that left out the important pieces. He didn't mention the napkin dispenser. He didn't mention the crowd of witnesses. He definitely didn't mention the Navy SEAL who had walked in and taken the whole room away from him in under 2 minutes. Parker studied him for a long moment. He didn't ask more questions, because he didn't need to. He had built a quiet system over the years. Small fees, collected here and there from business owners too scared or too tired to fight back. A little cut sent up the chain to keep certain people happy. It worked because nobody talked. It worked because nobody fought back. If word got out that the Middleton Diner had refused to pay, and gotten away with it, other business owners might start refusing too. The whole thing could unravel. "Let it cool for a few days," Parker said finally. "Don't go back there yet. I'll handle it through other channels." Harson nodded, relieved to have someone else carry the weight of the problem. He didn't ask what other channels meant. He didn't want to know. Parker waited until Harson left the office, then picked up his phone and made a call of his own. Quiet, careful, the kind of call he'd made many times before. Somewhere across town, a plan started moving that Odessa Middleton knew nothing about yet. Back at the diner, the evening rush had come and gone. Odessa locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and walked the 6 blocks home the way she did every night, her feet aching, her mind still turning over everything that had happened that morning. Timothy walked beside her, quiet, watching the street like he was still somewhere overseas, instead of home. He hadn't said much since the diner. Odessa knew that look on her son. He was thinking. At the house, she checked the mailbox out of habit before going inside. Bills, a flyer for a church bake sale, and underneath it all, a plain manila folder with no name written on it. No stamp, no return address. Somebody had walked it up to her mailbox by hand. "What's that?" Timothy asked, watching her turn it over in her hands. "I don't know." She carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table under the light. Her hands were steady, but something in her chest had gone tight and cold. She opened the folder. Inside were papers, old ones, some yellowed with age, permit records, inspection reports, names of businesses she recognized from around the neighborhood, some still open, some long closed, dates going back years. and next to several of the names, handwritten notes about fees and compliance issues, the same kind of language Harson had used that morning. Timothy leaned over her shoulder, reading fast, his jaw tightening with every page. "Mama," he said slowly, "this isn't the first time." Odessa stared at the papers spread across her kitchen table, the weight of it settling into her bones. Somebody inside that department knew what was happening. Somebody had been watching long enough to gather all of this. And somebody wanted her to know the truth before it happened to her, too. "Somebody's trying to warn me," she whispered. Timothy sat down across from her, his eyes hard now, the calm from that morning replaced by something sharper. "Then, we're going to find out who," he said. "And we're going to find out everything they know." Outside, the street was quiet. But inside that kitchen, under one dim light, the real fight had just begun. 2 days passed quiet. Odessa opened the diner every morning like always, though she noticed herself glancing at the door more than usual, half expecting Harson to walk through it again. He didn't, but the folder sat on her kitchen table at home, untouched since that first night, waiting. On the third morning, a woman in a city polo shirt walked into the diner carrying a clipboard. She introduced herself as a health inspector and said she was there for a routine check. Odessa's stomach dropped. "We had an inspection 8 months ago. Passed clean." "I know," the inspector said, not quite meeting her eyes. "This one came through faster than usual." Timothy, sitting at the counter with his coffee, set his cup down slow and watched the woman move through the kitchen. He didn't say anything. He just watched, the way he'd learned to watch things that didn't add up. The inspection took nearly an hour. The inspector checked the walk-in cooler, the prep stations, the dish sanitizer, the hand-washing sink. She wrote things down on her clipboard, her face giving nothing away. Odessa stood nearby the whole time, hands clasped tight in front of her, 40 years of pride and worry tangled together in her chest. When it was over, the inspector closed her clipboard. "You passed," she said. "Everything's clean. Better than clean, actually." Odessa let out a breath she'd been holding for an hour. "Thank you." The inspector nodded, gathering her things. She glanced toward the door, then back at Odessa, her voice dropping low enough that only Odessa and Timothy, standing close, could hear it. "Off the record," she said. "Somebody upstairs wants this place closed. I don't know why, I don't know who exactly. But this inspection got pushed through fast, and that doesn't happen unless somebody's leaning on somebody. Be careful." Before Odessa could ask anything else, the inspector was walking out the door, back to her car, back to whatever system had sent her here in the first place. Odessa stood frozen behind the counter, the inspector's words settling over her like a cold hand on the back of her neck. Timothy came around the counter and stood beside her. "You hear that?" "I heard it." Odessa's voice was quiet. "Somebody wants us closed." "This isn't just that officer anymore, Timothy. This is bigger than him." "I know." That afternoon, once the lunch rush died down and the diner sat mostly empty, Odessa brought the manila folder from home and spread it across a back booth table. Timothy sat across from her, going through the pages again, this time slower, more careful. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a name near the bottom of one page. "This business closed 2 years ago. And look here, the note next to it. Same kind of language Harson used with you. Compliance issue. Fee owed." Odessa leaned over the page, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. She recognized the name. A little shoe repair shop that used to sit 2 blocks over, run by an old man who'd retired suddenly, or so everyone thought at the time. Nobody had ever said why. "You think this happened to him too," she said. "I think this happened to a lot of people," Timothy said. "And I think somebody's been keeping track of it, quiet, for a long time." Whoever left this folder in your mailbox wanted you to see the pattern before it was too late. Odessa sat back in the booth, the weight of it pressing down on her. 40 years she'd run this diner clean, honest, careful. And now she understood. She wasn't just fighting one bad cop with an attitude problem. She was standing at the edge of something much bigger, something that had been quietly hurting people in this neighborhood for years, while nobody said a word. Timothy closed the folder and looked at his mother, his eyes steady and sure, in a way that reminded her of when he was young, before the Navy, before any of this. Just her boy, ready to stand between her and anything that came for her. "I've got contacts," he said. "People I trust, from my time in the service. Lawyers, investigators. I'm going to make some calls, Mama. We're going to do this the right way, but we are going to do it." Odessa reached across the table and took his hand. "Then, let's find out how deep this goes," she said. The following week, Timothy sat on the back porch with his phone pressed to his ear, talking to a Navy JAG officer he'd served alongside years ago, a man who now worked in military legal affairs but still knew people in civilian law. The call was short. By the end of it, Timothy had a name and a number. Yelena Carmen, a civil rights attorney who'd built her career fighting exactly this kind of case. Yelena came to the diner 2 days later, arriving after closing so they could talk without an audience. She was younger than Odessa expected, sharp-eyed, carrying a laptop bag heavy with files. She'd known the Middleton family for years, back when she was a young lawyer just starting out, and Odessa used to feed her free pie on slow Tuesday nights. "Timothy told me some of it on the phone," Yelena said, sitting across from Odessa in the back booth. "I want to hear the rest from you." Odessa told her everything: the fee, the napkin dispenser, the citation, the folder in her mailbox, the inspector's warning. Yelena listened without interrupting, her pen moving fast across a legal pad. "I filed some records requests already," Timothy said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. "City fee schedules, going back 5 years. There's no sidewalk vendor compliance fee listed anywhere. Never has been." Yelena flipped through the pages. "So he made it up on the spot." "Looks that way." "That's not just harassment," Yelena said. "That's extortion. If we can prove it's a pattern, not a one-time thing, we're looking at something a lot more serious than one bad cop having a bad day." Odessa slid the manila folder across the table. "This came to my mailbox. I don't know who left it." Yelena opened it and went quiet for a long moment, reading through the old permit records, the yellowed pages, the handwritten notes. Her jaw tightened as she worked through it. "These names," she said finally. "I recognize 2 of them. Small businesses that closed suddenly. No clear reason given. I always wondered." She looked up. "This is bigger than I thought." Over the next several days, Yelena and Timothy worked the case from 2 directions. Yelena cross-referenced the folder's records against public business licensing data, tracking which shops had closed and when. Timothy, using his own network and some patience, tracked down 2 of the former owners still living in the area: a retired shoe repairman and a woman who used to run a small hair salon 3 blocks from the diner. Both of them told the same story, almost word for word. A fee that didn't exist, a threat wrapped in a badge, a choice between paying or losing everything they'd built. Both had paid. Both had eventually closed anyway, worn down by fees that kept coming back, month after month, until there was nothing left to give. 4 businesses, Yelena said, laying it all out on the table one evening. The diner's lights dimmed low, chairs stacked on tables around them. All in this district, all over the last 3 years. All paying Harson directly, off the books. Nothing reported to the city. Odessa sat with her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at the papers in front of her. Proof of something she'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone in this. Other people had stood exactly where she was standing now, and most of them had lost. "I kept a notebook," she said quietly. "Every time anybody came in here with a threat, a demand, anything that didn't sit right, I wrote it down. Dates, times, what they said. I've done it for years. Habit, I guess. Never thought I'd need it." She got up and came back a minute later with a worn spiral notebook, its pages soft from years of handling. Yelena took it carefully, like it was made of glass, and began reading through decades of quiet observation. A woman documenting her own survival one entry at a time. "Odessa," Yelena said, looking up. "This notebook might be the most important piece of evidence we have. It corroborates everything. Dates, amounts, names, all of it matches what the others told Timothy." Odessa felt something settle in her chest, something between pride and grief. 40 years of writing things down just in case, and now the case had finally come. Yelena closed the notebook gently and looked around the table at both of them. "This is strong," she said. "Strong enough to go public. But once we do, there's no taking it back. Harson and whoever's protecting him will fight hard." She looked directly at Odessa. "Are you ready for that?" Odessa didn't answer right away. She thought about 40 years of early mornings, of raising Timothy above this diner, of every regular who'd sat at this counter through good years and hard ones. She thought about the shoe repairman and the woman with the hair salon, both worn down and gone. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's do it." 3 days later, Odessa sat under bright studio lights at the local news station, Timothy on one side of her, Yelena on the other. Her hands were folded tight in her lap, but her voice, when the reporter asked her first question, came out steady and clear. "I've run my diner for 40 years, she said. "Never missed an inspection. Never had a complaint. And a police officer walked in and told me I owed him $500 for a fee that doesn't exist anywhere in this city's records." Yelena laid out the evidence next to her. The notebook, the pattern of 4 businesses, the fee schedule showing no such fee had ever existed. She named Officer Gary Harson directly, her voice calm but unrelenting. "This is not one bad interaction," Yelena told the camera. "This is a pattern of harassment against black-owned businesses in this district, going back at least 3 years. We have documentation. We have witnesses, and we intend to see it addressed." The segment aired that evening at 6 o'clock. By 7, it was already spreading online, shared and reshared through the neighborhood, through church groups, through people who'd eaten at Middleton's Corner Diner their whole lives and never known what Odessa had been quietly enduring. The next morning, the diner was busier than it had been in years. Regulars came in with their chests puffed out, telling Odessa how proud they were, how they'd always known she was tougher than she let on. Strangers came in, too, people who'd seen the story and wanted to support the diner that had refused to back down. Odessa moved through the crowd all morning, pouring coffee, accepting hugs, trying to keep the tears out of her eyes. It felt good. It felt like something was finally moving in the right direction. 2 days after the story aired, the police department released a short statement. Officer Gary Harson had been placed on administrative desk duty, pending an internal review of the allegations against him. Timothy read the statement out loud from his phone at the counter, and a small cheer went up from the regulars sitting nearby. Maverick banged his coffee mug against the counter in celebration. Odessa allowed herself a small smile, the first real one in days. But Timothy didn't smile. He read the statement again, slower this time, his eyes narrowing. "Desk duty," he said. "Pending review. That's not a firing. That's not even a suspension without pay. That's a department protecting its own, while it looks like they're doing something." "It's something," Odessa said. It's more than we had a week ago. It's a start, Timothy agreed. But Mama, listen to me. The man who told him to lay low. The man who's been letting this happen for years. That man hasn't been touched at all. Whoever's really running this, whoever's been collecting money and looking the other way, they're still sitting comfortable somewhere, and they know exactly how to make a problem like you disappear quietly if they need to. Odessa's smile faded. She knew he was right. She'd felt it too, underneath the relief. A small, cold feeling that this fight was far from over, that the ground beneath her was still not steady. Across town, in a precinct office with the blinds drawn, Captain Dale Parker sat at his desk with the local news story pulled up on his computer screen, reading it for the third time. His jaw was tight. His hands, resting flat on the desk, were perfectly still. The stillness of a man forcing himself to stay calm. He had built something careful over the years. Quiet arrangements. Money moving in small, unremarkable amounts. Enough to keep certain people comfortable without drawing attention. It had worked because nobody talked, and because the people he targeted rarely had the resources to fight back. Odessa Middleton had resources now. A lawyer. A son with a public reputation and government connections. And now, the eyes of the whole city watching. Parker closed the laptop slowly, his mind already turning through the list of people he needed to call, the moves he needed to make before this got any further out of hand. Harsin had been sloppy, careless. But Parker did not intend to let one careless officer bring down everything he had built. He picked up his phone and began to dial. A week passed, and the excitement around the diner settled into something quieter, steadier. The crowds thinned back to regular size. Odessa let herself believe, just a little, that the worst of it was over. Then, on a Tuesday morning, she found out how wrong she was. Officer Gary Harsin was back on patrol. No announcement, no follow-up statement from the department. Timothy found out from Officer Rupert, who mentioned it in passing while grabbing coffee to go, his voice careful, like he wasn't sure he should be saying it at all. Internal review cleared him, Rupert said. Said there wasn't enough evidence to sustain the complaint. He's back on the street as of yesterday. Timothy stood very still behind the counter, coffee pot in hand, forgetting for a moment to pour. Not enough evidence? We gave them a notebook, 4 witnesses, and city fee records showing the charge never existed. Rupert shrugged, uncomfortable. I'm just telling you what I heard, man. I'm sorry. That afternoon, before Odessa had time to process the news about Harsin, a letter arrived from the city clerk's office. She opened it standing at the counter, reading it twice, because the words didn't make sense the first time. Her business license, the letter said, had expired 8 months ago. Failure to renew constituted a violation of city code. Her food service and liquor permit was now under formal review for potential revocation. She had 30 days to respond or resolve the discrepancy before further action would be taken. Odessa's hands went cold around the paper. "This is wrong," she said. "I renewed that license myself. I remember doing it. I mail everything early, every single year, because I don't trust the mail to be on time." Timothy took the letter from her and read it, his face hardening with every line. This isn't a coincidence. Harsin's back on the street, and a week later, suddenly, there's a problem with a license you've had for decades. You think somebody did this on purpose? I think somebody's protecting Harsin. And now that they can't touch him publicly without more scrutiny, they're coming after you a different way. A way that looks legal. A way that looks like paperwork instead of harassment. Odessa sat down heavily in the back booth, the letter trembling slightly in her hand. 40 years, and now bureaucracy itself was being turned into a weapon against her. If they revoked her permit, it wouldn't matter how many news stories aired or how many people believed her. The diner would close, legally, quietly, and Harson would still be out on patrol like nothing had ever happened. "We're not going to let this stand," Timothy said. "Call Yelena, tonight." Yelena arrived within the hour, her laptop bag already open on the table before she'd even sat down. She read the letter carefully, her expression sharpening with each line, the same way it had when she'd first read the manila folder weeks earlier. "This is retaliation," she said, dressed up as an administrative error. "It's a common tactic. Bury someone in paperwork problems instead of confronting them directly, because paperwork is harder to fight and slower to resolve." "Can they actually do this?" Odessa asked. "Can they just take my permit over a mistake that isn't even mine?" "Not if we can prove the mistake isn't real," Yelena said. "Do you have your renewal confirmation? Anything from when you filed it?" Odessa thought hard, her mind racing back through years of paperwork, filing cabinets, receipts kept out of habit more than necessity. "I keep copies of everything, always have. It should be in my files at home, in a folder with the other permits." "Then we need to find it tonight," Yelena said. Before this goes any further, Timothy drove his mother home while Yelena stayed behind at the diner, making calls, pulling up whatever public records she could access from her laptop. At the house, Odessa went straight to the hallway closet, where she kept an old filing cabinet, its drawers a little stiff from years of use. She worked through folder after folder, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. Timothy crouched beside her, sorting through a second stack. An hour passed. Then, near the bottom of a folder marked simply "Permits," Odessa's hand stopped. There it was. A renewal confirmation, dated correctly, filed on time, with the city's own stamp across the top as proof of receipt. "Found it," she whispered, holding the page like it was something precious. Timothy took it from her carefully, checking every detail twice. "This is it, Mama. This proves the letter is wrong. This proves somebody's lying." Odessa looked at the paper in his hands, relief and fury tangled together in her chest. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we go show them exactly how wrong they are." The next morning, Odessa stood in front of the city clerk's office, with the renewal confirmation clutched in a folder against her chest. Yelena walked beside her, calm and businesslike, a stack of documents tucked under one arm. Timothy had wanted to come too, but Yelena had convinced him it would be better for Odessa to handle this one herself, with a lawyer at her side instead of a son whose presence might make the room feel like a confrontation before anyone said a word. Inside, they were led to a small office where a clerk sat behind a desk stacked with files. Yelena didn't waste time. She laid the renewal confirmation on the desk, the city's own stamp facing up. "My client's license was renewed and filed on time," Yelena said. "Here's the confirmation, stamped and dated by this office. The letter claiming otherwise appears to be in error." The clerk studied the paper, his expression shifting from polite distance to visible discomfort. He pulled up something on his computer, typed for a moment, then frowned at the screen. "This is odd," he said slowly. "According to our system, this renewal was never logged. But you're right, this confirmation is legitimate. It has our stamp." He looked up, apologetic now. "I don't know how this happened." "We do," Yelena said evenly. "Someone removed it from your system. And we'd like that corrected today, in writing, along with a formal statement clearing my client's license of any violation." The clerk excused himself and came back 20 minutes later with a supervisor who reviewed the confirmation, made a few uncomfortable phone calls, and finally agreed to issue a written correction. By that afternoon, the city clerk's office had quietly walked back the violation, admitting the license had, in fact, been properly renewed all along. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a headline, but it was another crack in the wall, another moment where the truth had pushed back against the lie. and Odessa felt the weight in her chest ease just slightly as she folded the correction letter and placed it carefully in her bag. While they waited that morning in the clerk's office lobby, Yelena had used the time to dig through public records on her laptop, chasing a hunch that had been nagging her since she first read the manila folder. She was looking into local campaign finance filings, curious whether any of the pressure on Odessa connected to something beyond the police department. What she found made her sit up straight. A political action committee calling itself the Wilmont Avenue Neighborhood Safety Fund had been quietly donating to Councilwoman Rhea Van Camp's re-election campaign for the past 2 years. The fund's paperwork was thin, vague about its actual source of income, registered to an address that turned out to be a small mailbox rental office 3 blocks from City Hall. Yelena cross-referenced the fund's donation dates against the timeline in Odessa's manila folder. The same years, the same district, the same pattern of businesses closing suddenly after facing unexplained fees. The dates lined up close enough to feel like more than coincidence. She showed Timothy and Odessa what she'd found later that evening. Back at the diner after closing, the 3 of them gathered around the same back booth where this had all started weeks ago. "This isn't just a rogue cop anymore," Yelena said, tapping the screen. "And it's not just a captain protecting him either. If this fund is what I think it is, money from these fees has been moving all the way up to a city councilwoman's campaign. Harson's the hand doing the collecting. Parker's the one managing it. And Van Camp might be the one benefiting from it at the very top." Odessa stared at the screen, the enormity of it settling over her slow and heavy. "This isn't just about my diner anymore, is it?" "No," Yelena said quietly. "It's about a system. And systems don't fall in one day. This is going to take patience, and it's going to take more evidence than we have right now to prove the money trail all the way up." Timothy's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and something in his expression changed. "What is it?" Odessa asked. "Maverick," Timothy said, reading the message. "He says he saw Harson's cruiser parked across the street from the diner tonight, after we closed, just sitting there, watching." The 3 of them looked at each other in the dim light of the empty diner, the sense of quiet progress from that morning giving way to something colder. "He knows we're getting close," Yelena said. 2 nights later, Timothy stayed late at the diner helping his mother close, going over receipts and locking up the back storage room while Odessa finished wiping down the counters. It was almost 11 by the time he said goodnight and headed out to his car, the street quiet, most of the storefronts along the block already dark. He'd driven maybe 6 blocks when he saw the flash of red and blue lights fill his rearview mirror. Timothy's stomach tightened, but his training took over fast. The same steady discipline that had carried him through 10 years of high-pressure situations overseas. He signaled, pulled to the curb slow and careful, put both hands on the wheel where they could be seen, and waited. He already knew, before the officer's silhouette even reached his window, exactly who it was going to be. Harson leaned down, flashlight in hand, sweeping it across the inside of the car. "License and registration. Can I ask what the stop is for, officer?" "Taillights out." "It's not," Timothy said evenly. "I checked it myself this morning before I left the house. I'm telling you, it's out." Harson's voice had an edge to it, tight and eager, like a man looking for an excuse to escalate. "You giving me a hard time about it?" "No, sir." Timothy kept his hands on the wheel, his voice flat and calm. Quietly, without making it obvious, he reached down and tapped his phone screen, starting a voice recording, letting it sit face up on the passenger seat where it could pick up everything clearly. "Step out of the vehicle." "For a taillight?" "I said step out." Harson's hand rested on his belt now, close to his hip, his whole posture coiled tight. "You think because your mama's got a lawyer now, you're untouchable? You think that badge on the news means something out here, on this street, right now? Just you and me?" Timothy's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level, kept every word deliberate. "I think you pulled me over for no reason, and I think you're hoping I'll give you one. I don't need you to give me anything." Harson's flashlight beam jerked toward Timothy's face, blinding for a second. "I can make tonight go real different depending on how you talk to me. You understand that? One word to my captain about how you resisted, how you got aggressive, and it doesn't matter what you did overseas. Doesn't matter who's proud of you on the news. You'll spend tonight in a cell, and we'll see how fast your lawyer friend can undo that." Timothy said nothing for a moment, letting the silence sit heavy between them. He understood exactly what this was. Harson wasn't looking for a taillight. He was looking for a reaction, something that would give him leverage, something that could be twisted into a story that discredited the whole family, buried the case, and painted the decorated veteran as the real threat. Timothy had faced worse men in worse places and kept his composure through far higher stakes than this. "I'm not going to give you a reason," he said quietly. "Not tonight. Not ever." Harson stared at him for a long, tense moment, flashlight beam still hovering, his breathing audible in the quiet street. Whatever he'd been hoping for, it wasn't coming. Timothy sat perfectly still, hands on the wheel, eyes forward, refusing to hand him a single thing to use. Finally, Harson straightened up, frustration written across his face. "Get your taillight checked," he muttered, stepping back from the window. "Next time, I won't be so easy on you." He walked back to his cruiser without another word. A minute later, the lights behind Timothy shut off, and the cruiser pulled away into the dark. Timothy sat still for a long moment, hands still gripping the wheel, before he finally let out a slow breath. He reached over and picked up his phone, stopping the recording, and played the last 30 seconds back just to be sure it had captured everything clearly. It had. Every word. Every threat. He called Yelena the moment he got home, even though it was nearly midnight, and sent her the file before she'd even finished picking up the phone. She called back within minutes, having listened to it twice already. "Timothy, this is huge! This isn't just harassment anymore. This is an officer threatening to fabricate charges against you, on recording, unprompted, paired with everything else we've already got." "I know," Timothy said quietly, staring out his dark living room window toward the street. "Yelena, I think we have enough now. I think it's time." There was a pause on the line, and when Yelena spoke again, her voice was steady and sure. "I think you're right," she said. "Let's file." The following week, Yelena filed everything at once. She submitted a formal complaint to the state attorney general's office, laying out the full pattern. Odessa's decades-old notebook, the 4 victimized businesses, the fabricated fee, the retaliatory license violation, and now the recorded traffic stop where Harson had openly threatened to fabricate charges against Timothy. Alongside the complaint, she filed a civil lawsuit on Odessa's behalf, naming Harson directly and citing the department's failure to act on a credible pattern of abuse. The story broke wide within days. What had started as a local news segment turned into coverage that spread across the state. Then further, picked up by outlets hungry for a story about a decorated veteran's family standing up to corruption. Reporters called the diner so often that Odessa had to unplug the phone during the lunch rush just to get through service. The pressure worked fast. 3 days after the filing, the police department announced that Captain Dale Parker had been suspended pending an internal investigation into his handling of complaints against Harson. City officials, sensing which way the wind was blowing, began quietly distancing themselves from Councilwoman Rhea Van Camp, whose name had started circulating in connection with the mysterious neighborhood safety fund Yelena had uncovered weeks earlier. Odessa watched it unfold like something out of a dream she hadn't let herself have. The diner filled every morning with people who wanted to shake her hand, tell her how proud they were, how she'd done something they'd always wished someone would do. Strangers left extra money in the tip jar with notes that said things like, "Thank you for not backing down." Maverick started calling her a legend, only half joking. For the first time in weeks, Odessa let herself breathe. She let herself imagine an ending where the diner stayed open, where Harson lost his badge, where the people who'd hurt other business owners finally faced something close to justice. "We did it," she said to Timothy one evening, watching the last of the dinner crowd trickle out the door. "Didn't we? We actually did it." Timothy didn't answer right away. He was wiping down the counter, his movements careful, his eyes distant in a way Odessa recognized from his years in the service. The look of a man who'd learned the hard way that things rarely stayed won for long. "It's good news, Mama," he said finally. "I'm not saying it isn't. But people like Parker, people like Van Camp, they don't build what they've built by folding easy. A suspension isn't a conviction. A bad news cycle isn't a courtroom. I want to celebrate this with you. I do. But I need you to understand it's not over yet." Odessa waved a dish towel at him, more hopeful than she'd let herself be in weeks. "Let an old woman have her good week, Timothy." He smiled at that, tired but real, and let it go for the night. But he'd been right to worry. 9 days after the filing, a letter arrived from the state attorney general's office. Yelena read it out loud in the back booth, her voice growing flatter with every sentence. The investigation into Harson and the department was being placed under procedural review, a bureaucratic delay with no clear timeline, citing the need for additional documentation before any formal action could proceed. "What does that mean?" Odessa asked, though something in her stomach had already guessed the answer. "It means somebody made a call," Yelena said quietly, setting the letter down. "It means Van Camp still has reach in places we didn't expect. Political relationships. Favors owed. This isn't over. It just went quiet again." 2 days after that, word came through Rupert that Parker had been reinstated, his suspension lifted on what the department called a procedural technicality. No explanation, no further comment. Odessa sat in the back booth that night after closing, the folder and the notebook spread in front of her, the same table where all of this had started to come together weeks earlier. The excitement of the past 10 days had drained out of her fast, replaced by something heavier, something closer to dread. "They're not finished," she said quietly. Timothy sat down across from her, his jaw tight. "No," he said, "they're not. And I think whatever comes next, they're going to make it hurt." Outside, the street was dark and empty, the diner's neon sign the only light on the block. Neither of them could have known, sitting there that night, just how right he was, or how soon the next blow would land. The morning of the diner's 40th anniversary, Odessa woke before her alarm, too excited to stay in bed. She'd been planning this celebration for weeks. Banners, a discount on coffee all day, a table set up out front with photos from the diner's early years. 40 years since she'd opened those doors for the very first time, a young widow with a newborn son and nothing but grit and a small loan from her church. She dressed carefully, humming to herself, and drove to the diner while the sky was still gray, with early morning light. She saw the padlock before she'd even fully parked the car. A heavy chain wrapped through the door handles, secured with a thick padlock, and a bright orange notice taped to the glass. Odessa sat frozen behind the wheel for a moment, certain she was misreading it, certain the morning light was playing tricks on her tired eyes. She wasn't. She got out slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her, and walked up to read the notice with her own hands. Zoning violation. Immediate closure, pending review. Signed by an official she'd never heard of, dated the night before, time-stamped just after midnight. "No," she whispered, pulling at the chain like it might just fall away if she tried hard enough. No, no, this can't be right. Timothy arrived 20 minutes later, having rushed over the second his mother's shaking voice reached him on the phone. He pulled up fast, parked crooked at the curb, and jogged toward the door where Odessa stood staring at the padlock like it had personally reached out and struck her. He read the notice twice, his face going very still, the same stillness Odessa remembered from the day he'd walked into this same doorway weeks ago and faced Harson down for the first time. Zoning violation, he said quietly. There's no zoning violation. This building's been operating under the same permit since before I was born. Behind them, cars began to slow along the street. Neighbors on their way to work noticed the chain, the notice, the small crowd already starting to gather. People who'd seen the anniversary announcement online, who'd planned to come celebrate 40 years of Middleton's Corner Diner, standing instead in front of a padlocked door. Word spread down the block fast. Within the hour, a local news van pulled up, having heard about the celebration days earlier and hoping for a feel-good follow-up story. Instead, they found Odessa Middleton standing in front of her own locked diner, chains wrapped tight across the doors she'd walked through every single morning for 4 decades. A reporter approached carefully, microphone lowered, unsure whether to even ask for a statement. Odessa looked at the camera, and for a moment, something inside her wavered. 40 years, undone overnight, on the one day meant to celebrate everything she'd built. I don't have anything to say right now, she said quietly, her voice barely holding steady. Not yet. The crowd on the sidewalk kept growing. Regulars who'd eaten breakfast here for years stood shoulder to shoulder with strangers who'd only heard about Odessa through the news. Somebody had brought balloons for the anniversary party. They sat forgotten in a box near the curb, bright colors against the gray morning, a small, cruel reminder of what this day was supposed to be. Timothy stood beside his mother, staring at the padlock, his mind working fast and cold the way it had been trained to work under pressure. He recognized this for exactly what it was. Not a real violation, but a message, a warning. The last, desperate strike of people who still held power even after everything that had been exposed about them. They had proven the fee was fake. They had proven the license letter was false. They had recorded a threat on tape. And still, somehow, this system had found one more lever to pull, one more piece of paperwork to weaponize, and used it to strike at the one thing that mattered most: Odessa's diner, on the one day she should have felt proudest. Odessa's shoulders sagged just slightly, the fight draining out of her for the first time since this had all started. Maybe they win, she said, so quiet only Timothy could hear it. Maybe people like that just always win in the end. Timothy turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his, steady and certain in a way that pulled her attention away from the padlock and back to him. They don't win, Mama, he said. Not today. I need you to trust me. I need one more day. We already have everything we need to end this for good. I promise you that. We just haven't used all of it yet. Odessa searched her son's face, 40 years of exhaustion and fear pressing down on her, and found something there steady enough to hold on to. Then use it, she said. Whatever it takes. Use it. Timothy didn't waste a minute. He drove Odessa home from the padlocked diner, made sure she was settled with a neighbor checking in on her, and then sat down at her kitchen table with his phone and a legal pad, the same table where they'd first spread out the manila folder weeks ago. He called his old JAG contact again, the same officer who'd connected him to Yelena back at the start of all this. This time, the conversation was different. Timothy laid out everything: the stalled state investigation, Parker's quiet reinstatement, the fabricated zoning violation timed to hit on the diner's anniversary. He didn't ask for advice this time. He asked for a door. Local channels are compromised, Timothy said. The department protects its own. The state AG's office is dragging its feet because somebody with pull made a call. I need this to go somewhere they can't reach. There was a pause on the line. Then his contact told him what he needed to hear. The FBI's Civil Rights Division handled exactly this kind of case: police extortion, retaliation against witnesses, corruption reaching into local government. A case this documented, with this much public attention already surrounding it, could move fast through federal channels, especially with a U.S. Attorney's office willing to act. Within the hour, Timothy had a name and a direct line to a federal investigator. Yelena arrived at the house not long after, laptop already open, moving with the same fast efficiency she'd brought to every crisis since Chapter 1. She and Timothy spent the afternoon compiling everything they had, organizing it the way a courtroom would need it. Nothing left out. Nothing exaggerated. Odessa's notebook, decades of quiet documentation, went first. Then the 4 victimized business owners' statements, along with the shoe repairman and the salon owner Timothy had tracked down weeks earlier. The city fee schedule proving Odessa's fee had never existed. The renewal confirmation proving the license letter was fabricated. The campaign finance records tying the Wilmont Avenue Neighborhood Safety Fund to Councilwoman Van Camp. And finally, the recording from Timothy's traffic stop, Harson's own voice threatening to fabricate charges, unprompted and unmistakable. "We're not creating anything new," Yelena said, scanning through the final compiled file before sending it. "Everything here we already built. We just never had the right hands to hand it to." Timothy nodded, watching her work. That had always been the plan, even if he hadn't said it out loud until now. Respect his mother's wish to fight this fair through the local system first, and only reach past it if that system proved it couldn't be trusted. It had proven exactly that. The moment a chain went around the doors of a diner that had never done anything wrong. Yelena sent the full file to the federal investigator that evening. The response came back faster than either of them expected. The investigator called within 2 hours, her voice sharp and focused over speakerphone. She'd reviewed the material personally. The pattern was clear, well documented, and public enough that moving quickly served everyone's interest, including the department's, before things got worse. She confirmed federal agents working alongside a U.S. attorney's office had enough to act immediately. "There's something else," the investigator added. "Word is the city's holding a press conference tomorrow morning outside the diner. Some kind of statement defending the closure, trying to get ahead of the bad press. We're going to be there, too." Timothy and Yelena exchanged a look across the kitchen table. "They're going to use my mother's own diner to spin their story," Timothy said quietly. "Then let them," the investigator said, "because we're going to be standing right there when they do it." After the call ended, Timothy walked into the living room where Odessa sat waiting, worry etched into every line of her face. He crouched down in front of her chair, taking her hands the way he had that morning outside the padlocked door. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "City Hall's holding a press conference at the diner, trying to explain away the closure. Federal agents are going to be there too, Mama, with everything we've already got. This ends tomorrow." Odessa searched his face for a long moment, the exhaustion of the day still heavy in her eyes, but something else rising up beneath it now. Something that felt, for the first time in hours, like hope with teeth. "Tomorrow," she repeated softly. Outside, the evening settled dark and quiet over the neighborhood, over the padlocked diner 6 blocks away, over a city that had no idea what was coming for it in the morning. By 8 the next morning, a small stage had been set up on the sidewalk outside Middleton's Corner Diner, a city seal fastened to a podium, a handful of officials standing behind it, looking carefully composed. A cluster of reporters waited with cameras ready. Neighbors gathered along the edges of the street, drawn by word that the city planned to explain the padlock in person. Odessa stood near the back of the crowd with Timothy and Yelena, her arms crossed tight against her chest, watching officials she'd never met prepare to talk about her diner like it belonged to them. Councilwoman Rhea Van Camp stepped up to the podium first, her smile practiced and easy. "This morning, we want to address some concerns about a local business closure," she began. "The city takes zoning compliance seriously. And while we understand this is a beloved neighborhood spot, rules exist to protect—" She never finished the sentence. A line of dark SUVs pulled up along the curb, doors opening fast, federal agents stepping out in quick, coordinated movements. A woman in a windbreaker marked FBI walked straight toward the stage, badge raised, voice carrying clear over the murmur of the crowd. "Gary Harsin!" she called out, and heads turned searching the crowd until they found him, standing near the edge of the gathered officials in his uniform, his face going pale in an instant. "You're under arrest for extortion and violation of federal civil rights law." Two agents moved toward him before he could react, pulling his arms behind his back, the cuffs closing with a metallic click that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent street. Harsin's mouth opened, some protest forming, but nothing came out. He looked toward the crowd, toward the diner behind him, toward the same regulars who had watched him threaten Odessa weeks earlier over a napkin dispenser and a fee that never existed. Maverick stood near the front of the crowd, arms crossed, watching without a shred of sympathy. The lead investigator turned next toward the stage itself, where Van Camp stood frozen at the podium, her practiced smile completely gone. "Councilwoman Van Camp, Captain Parker," the investigator said, loud enough for every camera to catch clearly. "You're both named in a federal indictment alongside Officer Harsin, related to a pattern of extortion targeting local business owners and the misuse of campaign finance channels to conceal it." Parker, standing off to the side, made a move like he might slip back through the crowd. Two agents were already beside him before he'd taken 3 steps. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions over each other. The crowd along the sidewalk buzzed with stunned disbelief. Then, slowly, something closer to celebration, as the reality of what they were witnessing set in. Neighbors who had gathered, expecting a defense of the diner's closure, instead watched the very people responsible for it get led away in handcuffs, live, in front of the cameras that had come to help them spin the story. A U.S. attorney representative stepped up to the abandoned podium once the agents had cleared the stage, holding up a document for the cameras. "The zoning violation cited for this business's closure has been reviewed and found to be fraudulent, issued without legal basis as an act of retaliation," she said. "It is voided, effective immediately." She gestured toward the diner's chained doors, and an officer stepped forward with a heavy pair of bolt cutters. The crowd went quiet, watching as the blades closed around the padlock's shackle with a sharp metallic snap. The chain slid loose and clattered to the sidewalk. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the crowd erupted, a wave of applause and cheering breaking across the street, loud enough to rattle the diner's front windows. Odessa stood frozen, staring at her own doors standing free again, the chain lying broken at her feet. 40 years of history behind that glass, nearly taken from her overnight by men who thought their power would always protect them. Timothy put a hand gently on her back. "Mama," he said softly, "it's yours again." Odessa took a slow breath. The weight of everything. The fee, the citation, the folder, the stalled investigation, the padlock, finally beginning to lift from her shoulders all at once. She looked at the open doorway, the same doorway Harsin had walked through weeks ago like he owned it, the same doorway her son had walked through just in time. She stepped forward, past the broken chain, toward the entrance of her diner, the crowd's cheers rising around her with every step. Odessa stepped through the doorway of her diner for the first time in over a day, the morning light spilling across the counter, the booths, the old photographs on the wall that had watched over 40 years of mornings just like this one. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Nothing had been touched, except the lock that had tried to keep her out. Behind her, the crowd poured in through the open door, filling the diner faster than it had filled in years. Regulars slid into booths they'd sat in for decades. Neighbors who'd only recently heard her story crowded around the counter, wanting to be part of this moment, wanting to see with their own eyes that the doors had really opened again. Reporters pushed in among them, cameras still rolling, capturing a scene far different from the one they'd arrived expecting. Odessa walked behind the counter like she'd done every morning for 40 years, her hands finding the coffee pot without thinking. Muscle memory carrying her through motions that had grounded her through every hard year this diner had survived. She started pouring cups, one after another, her hands steady now, steadier than they'd been in weeks. Timothy stood near the end of the counter, watching his mother work, a small, proud smile breaking across his face for the first time all morning. A reporter approached him, microphone extended, asking him to describe what it felt like watching everything unfold. "My mother built this place with nothing but hard work and a promise to herself," Timothy said, his voice carrying clear across the crowded room. "People tried to take it from her because they thought nobody was watching, because they thought an old woman running a diner alone couldn't fight back. They were wrong. She never stopped fighting, not for one single day." The crowd around him broke into applause, and Timothy, uncomfortable with the attention turning fully onto him, simply nodded and stepped back toward the counter, closer to his mother, where he preferred to be. By afternoon, once the crowd had thinned and the cameras had packed up and gone, a city representative arrived quietly at the diner, official folder in hand, looking considerably less confident than the officials who'd stood at that podium that morning. She offered Odessa a formal written apology on behalf of the city, along with an outline for financial restitution, compensation for the fraudulent citation, the wrongful closure, and the years of extorted fees now confirmed through the federal investigation. Odessa read the offer carefully, Timothy and Yelena standing beside her. The number was substantial, enough to cover every hardship the diner had faced these past weeks, and then some. "I appreciate this," Odessa said finally, sliding the paper back across the counter. "But I want this restitution to go to the others first. The shoe repair shop, the hair salon, everyone whose business didn't survive this the way mine did. They lost everything. I only lost a few days." The city representative looked surprised, then something closer to humbled. "I'll make sure that happens," she said quietly. Yelena caught Odessa's eye across the counter and gave a small, knowing smile. She'd expected nothing less. As evening settled over the neighborhood, the diner slowly emptied out, chairs coming down off tables, the last few regulars lingering over coffee they didn't need, just wanting to stay a little longer in a place that had almost been taken from them. Odessa moved through the familiar rhythm of closing, wiping down the counter, restocking napkins, the small, ordinary tasks that had never felt so precious. Timothy watched her from a stool near the register, his duffel bag still sitting by the door where he'd dropped it weeks ago, on the morning this had all started. "You did it, Mama," he said softly. Odessa paused, dish towel in hand, looking around at the diner. Her diner, unbroken, unbowed, standing exactly where she'd built it 40 years ago. "We did it," she said. She walked to the front window, past the last of the evening light falling gold across the tables, and reached for the small, hand-lettered sign hanging inside the glass. She'd flipped this sign 1,000 times over 4 decades. Nobody else had ever done it for her, and nobody was going to start now. She turned it over, slow and deliberate, until the word faced out toward the street, open. Outside, a few neighbors passing by paused, smiled, and gave her a small wave through the glass. Odessa smiled back, tired and proud, and finally, fully at peace. The diner stood open, just as it always had, just as it always would. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.